Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors. I am so happy to lead us in our discussion. We should have our host Nikki joining us very soon, but in the interim, we're going to get this evening started. We started a few minutes late, and I apologize for that. So let's kind of walk around the table and hear from my colleagues, starting with Dr. Graham, and just introduce yourself so our audience will know your background.
Thanks, Dr. Tony. I'm a retired physician. I worked in the western suburbs for 30 years. And after that, I spent 2 years working with a congressman in his office in Washington, D.C. I'm a specialist in rheumatology, and I'm going to try and answer your questions if I can.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I had a few patients with rheumatological issues today, and absolutely appreciate having colleagues who can help me do my job as a primary care doctor for sure. And speaking of primary care docs, Dr. James Miller is with us. And why don't you tell us a little bit about you as well, Doc?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. James Miller. I'm an internist. I have retired from practicing clinical medicine. However, I'm still interested in healing our community. I practiced for about 40 years in Chicago and in the near suburban areas, um, mainly taking care of adults and spent a lot of time taking care of geriatric patients. So that's my background.
Thank you, doctor. And yeah, I know about the geriatric patients. I had babies in my earlier practice, and now I have older babies, and they're even more fun than the ones I used to take care of. So let's wrap around and hear from Joseph Harrington. Why don't you share your background for the audience?
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be with my esteemed colleagues once again. My name is Joe Harrington. I've had an interesting background. Early on, I worked in mental health and education, but most of my career has been in healthcare and public health, mostly public health. I retired in 2017 from the Illinois Department of Public Health, where I was the regional health officer for Cook County, and also had the opportunity to serve with my good friend and colleague, Dr. Terry Mason, as Commissioner of Health for the city, Assistant Commissioner of Health for the city of Chicago, prior to being with the state.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, and we appreciate the service you both gave to the state and Dr. Terry Mason. Let's get your background in front of the audience.
I'm a native Chicagoan and went to all my education in the city of Chicago, including residency at what used to be one of the powerhouse hospitals, Michael Reese, and which is long gone now, and Mercy Hospital, which is also sort of gone now too. But went to med school, U of I, and have practiced in the city of Chicago as a practicing board certified urologist for over 25 years. And then decided that I would move into really trying to understand disease at its causal level. And that led me to a discussion around food. And that's, for those of you who know me, that's what I've been doing, and been doing this work and putting information out on radio now on WVON for over 31 years. So I'm grateful to be here and hopefully answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, sir. And again, being able to reach out to the community and just share messages of healing is just such a blessing. So thank you for what you do. For me, I am as you can see from under my name, family obesity doc, some training in nutrition and functional medicine. I too love to, talk about how people can heal naturally, and at times we need to integrate our technology, our medicines into the equation, but many times we can move away from those if we do a good job. So that's kind of where I stand. I definitely want to do a shout out to Congressman Danny Davis. I know he's not with us tonight, but just for allowing for us to have this platform. And I do want to do a shout out to Linda Johnson, who gave us a good evening message, and I appreciate her, as well as Jackie Cooper, who I know very well, and I appreciate you being here as well. So, and of course, Nellie Parnell King and Morris Parnell as well. Shout out to all of you guys for joining us. And I think I want to start the conversation kind of going back to the theme of eating real food. Real brief, guys. I was fortunate to record a podcast this past week. It wasn't really intentional to talk about erythritol, which is a substitute for sugar sweetener. But I talked about it because it was such a prominent conversation on Twitter and social media. And when you have all this back and forth, you wanna touch on it. So I'm gonna just give you a couple of highlights from the podcast, and then after that, I want my colleagues to chime in, around the question of, should we be even eating sugar alternatives? What are better ways to sweeten our palate? Should we be obsessed with the sweet taste in the first place? And I just want to touch on that. And for those who are not familiar, erythritol is a sugar alcohol. And it's a very interesting concept because it's sugar and alcohol, but it's not the kind, don't get too excited. It's not the kind that's going to get you tipsy when it comes to the alcohol. But though that combination is from a natural source, but the reason why we have even looked at it is because it doesn't raise your blood sugar, it doesn't spike your insulin. So for those who are diabetic, it became a popular way to make maybe a cake or a cookie with sugar in it, but not really sugar in it. So it tastes very sweet, but it's not really sugar. And I'm gonna tell you, it's very potent compared to sugar. The problem with it is that, like many sugar alcohols, like xylitol and others, it can give you some bloating, some gas, cramping, and diarrhea. And for a guy like me who has a sensitive stomach, that doesn't work very well. So that's and another thing about it that's really interesting, if you have a pet, particularly a dog, believe it or not, the sugar alcohols do not work well with pets. So if you have, and literally it could be fatal. So if you have, gums or any other item in the house, toothpaste that's sweetened with sugar alcohols like erythritol, you want to really be careful. So, but the reason why it made headlines is because there was an article in Nature published on February 27th, and the article it was a study of about 1,100 people, and they found that in these folks that were coming to the hospital to be treated for, evaluated for heart disease, they found that for those folk, there was an increased risk of heart disease if they had a high level of circulating erythritol, as an example. So, and they found that there was an increased risk for stroke and for heart disease, which is not something you'd be interested in having. And what they found is that when those levels got high enough, there was both thrombosis and platelet reactivity, meaning that your platelets would clump together. And most people know that platelets are used to help us when we're bleeding, stop us from bleeding, and do repair work, etc. So it's really important to have platelets, but you don't want them to be overreacting. So, so the question becomes, now that we have this study, and one of the things I've always messaged to anybody that hears my voice is that you always got to look at the study for the quality of it. You have to understand who sponsored it. And the first thing we have to point out about this study, it was an observational study. They just looked at data. So with these observational studies, you can, send surveys to people's homes, or you can look at data retrospectively going backwards or prospectively going forwards. So when you have studies like that, they only show possible association, possible correlation. So, and what that means is it gives you the foundation to say, you know what, since there is an association or a correlation, then maybe we can do a randomized controlled trial to then prove it. So it's really just a hypothesis. Unfortunately, in the media, it's going to be stated as fact. That's just what they do. They don't give this little nuance that we're trying to give, which is why it's important to have these kind of conversations. So having said that, it was in people who are already at risk for cardiovascular disease. And by the way, our bodies naturally make erythritol already, right? So is it that they were at risk for cardiovascular disease and it pushed them over the edge? Who knows? But at the end of the day, how you interpret this study is that there may be an association. So for high-risk individuals, there may be a good reason to pause and think about it. It was 30 or so grams a day. So nobody really consumes that much erythritol every day. That's another thing you have to think about. And so there's a lot of factors that make me pause about this study. Fortunately for me, I wasn't really consuming it anyway because I can't tolerate it in my belly. But for people who can tolerate it, the question becomes, what then do you do with this information? And what I would say, as my opinion, this is not the science, is if you're in a high risk category, you should at least pause and think about, are there alternatives that I can use? Recognizing that the study is not a show, it doesn't show causation, but it does make you pause. Then you say, well, what are those other options? And for me, it may be a pure stevia, it may be a pure monk fruit. There's another one called allulose. I just tend to favor the more natural, but this is the problem. All of them are highly processed, right? So if you go get, stevia, Truvia is a brand name. It's going to be highly processed. So, are we really getting a better product? I'm not sure. So I think the message for me, and that's what I want to hear from my colleagues, now that we know that one of the most popular sweeteners on the market, erythritol, there's one brand my kids use, Swerve. That's kind of like a brand that's out there. And so what should we use these things at all, or should we have a different approach? So I'm going to kind of pause there, open up to my colleagues and hear what they have to say on the topic of erythritol and what your thoughts are.
Well, I think that, obviously anytime there's, new information, we have to look at it and we have to evaluate it in terms of, how risky it is. Does it add risk to to our current situation in terms of being susceptible to different kinds of incidents? So I think that that those individuals that do have a situation where they're at high risk of having strokes, having heart disease, certainly should begin to look at, is this something I really want to use, or what other alternatives I have? And also look at, maybe, look at what have I been actually taking in. So what I'm saying is that the individuals who've been using sugar substitute need to look at which one they're using, and to determine whether or not this is the one they're using or not, and then try to make some determination from that as to what they want to back off of, and if what they can do in order to be able to make it without using the thing that may be causing to increasing their risk of having a stroke or heart attack.
Yeah.
I think that what we need to do, first of all, is clarify some terms. And the first term we need to clarify is heart disease. And when we talk about heart disease, when we're talking about it, heart disease actually has absolutely nothing to do with the heart in the beginning. It really doesn't. It is a disease of the blood vessels that feed the heart. And the blood vessels become blocked. And when the blood vessels are blocked, the blood can't get through to the heart. And then that creates a heart problem, a thing that we call a heart attack. So let's be real clear about that. So, we want to make sure that we are talking about these diseases properly. I tend to stay away from anything that's artificial. If I want to sweeten something, I try and use as natural a sweetener as I possibly can, one that's present that way in nature. And people may have different opinions about that, but that's kind of like the ones you mentioned, Doctor, and then others that you didn't. But the thing is that most any time you deviate from nature and create something else, it has side effects. And that side effect is going to be, first of all, the blood vessels and everything are going to say, what the hell is this? There's going to be an inflammatory reaction to it. And that inflammatory reaction or that inflammation is what causes the blood vessels to become blocked. And when it's blocked in the brain, we call it a stroke. When it's blocked in the heart, we call it a heart attack. When it's blocked in the blood vessels that feed our legs and feet, we call it peripheral vascular disease. But it's all the same thing. It's not different. It's just the same thing. So I would stop right there as some preliminary comments.
Yeah, I want to add some things to what Dr. Mason said. One of the first things that came to mind as you were talking, among many, is what is real food? Because you started out talking about real food, and I found a definition for real food on the internet. Now, I'm not saying this is what the definition should be, but I found it and it seems appropriate. And it said real food is considered to be all those foods that have not been industrially processed, or foods that have not had their natural qualities interfered with, or the quality of their composition. So that, to me, is a sound definition for what real food is. And I think many of us have lost sight of what food actually is, because a lot of what we buy is not what you said would be real food, but food that's been processed. So it's not food as it's naturally found. It's in some other form. The other thing that came to mind is a Latin term called caveat emptor, which means let the buyer beware. And so you really have to be careful of what you're going to buy, and any decision you make that involves your health or your well-being moving forward. So you really have to be careful. The last thing, when I was at Rush, I was involved in a major international study of prostate cancer called SELECT. And Dr. Mason I brought him in as one of the co-investigators for SELECT. And you talked about this study, which really was observational in nature, and they draw some conclusions based upon data that they had seen. The gold standard is a large-scale clinical trial, and I'm using SELECT as an example. SELECT was a large-scale clinical trial. It was conducted in the U.S., Canada, and Puerto Rico. At the end, we recruited over 30,000 men to determine whether selenium or vitamin E reduced the risk of prostate cancer. And what we found is they didn't. So that's what Dr. Hampton is talking about in terms of a study where you can conclusively draw some idea of what happened relative to what you should or should not do. So anybody that currently is taking selenium and or vitamin E to reduce their risk of prostate cancer is wasting their time and their money.
Yeah. And Nikki, I know you just joined us. We decided to start our conversation about the sugar alternatives since erythritol was in the news as potentially being associated with increased risk for cardiovascular disease if you consume it every day for a certain amount of time in high-risk individuals, and whether or not people should consume that. Be interested in hearing your thoughts on this topic too. Before you comment, though, I want to say that, like Dr. Mason, it's kind of a mixed bag. So I definitely agree, like, as natural as possible. That's why I wish stevia and monk fruit as examples. One's from plants, one's from fruit. And allulose is another good example. But what do you do with the honeys and the maple syrups and the dates and the molasses and agave nectars and things like that? And what I tell patients is it kind of depends on you and your health. And so if I have a person, I was literally just looking up honey with a patient just today, and I just pulled it up. I did a teaspoon of honey, and it had about, I think it has 17 carbs for a tablespoon, I think. And I kind of told her I usually do a division where you say carbs divided by 4. That gives you the approximate teaspoons of sugar. So I said there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can say, well, I'm just going to avoid things that are known to increase sugar in my body, or I can use my good old faithful meter, right? So I said to her, why don't you just see what happens? You go home. She was, not really a well-controlled diabetic, for lack of better words. And I said, let's see what happens an hour after you consume that honey, because I know you're really loving that in your morning tea. And so that's the experiment she's going to do. That's the experiment I ask people to do. So because I really could care less if it's natural, if it's still causing harm. So my goal is to allow my body to tell me what the outcome's going to be based on the experiment I do on my own body. And if my body says honey is going to harm me, I'm going to probably stay away from honey. And I may do stevia. So I think you have to listen to your body. And yes, honey's going to have way more nutrients than sugar, right? That's why we kind of like it. But is the value of the nutrients greater than any negative effects of a blood spike? And I would argue the blood spike is still more important, because you can get the same nutrients in other food items that don't spike your sugar. So that's my general philosophy. And I think people have to kind of choose the path that their body agrees with. So Nikki, have you thought about this subject in any way and want to comment at all? Oh, maybe she didn't hear me. So yeah, so we'll assume that she didn't hear that very well, or can't unmute. So now that we have that topic, on the table, I think it's important that we now ask. I was looking to see, we didn't have any questions in the chat yet. I do see Jacqueline Cooper. She said she stopped using sugar 2 years ago and started using honey and 1 cup of daily coffee, right? So and I think for her that works just fine, right? I've never used honey in coffee. It does seem like it would make it nice, but I think if you think about it, is that really going to harm her if it's not really that big of a deal? No. And then she comments further, I am not seeing or feeling any effect. So again, she did her own experiment, and she found that for her, it seems like it's not really giving her a negative outcome. And so again, that's exactly what I want people to do. Do your own experiment, see how your body responds. And people who are really healthy, they tend to do much better. So yeah, any thoughts on the topic, Nikki?
So can you guys hear me now?
We do.
Okay, wonderful. My speakers went out, and then everything went out. Well, so that's AT&T for you, right? That's AT&T. No. Well, sugar is just super, super addictive. And that I do want to share. Sugar is super, super addictive. And I mean, if you do a little research on it, it actually talks about how sugar is really more addictive than cocaine or heroin could actually be. So just let you know that sugar is just a little dangerous. It is. Did we say hello to the people who are here? Like, did we say hi to Nellie Purnell, who is here? And she says, good evening to everybody. Did we talk to them really quickly?
Yeah, we did real quickly. We did.
All right. Just want to make sure that we said hello to everyone who's there. Barbara Agnew is here just as well. And I think she was having some problems trying to get some questions across. And I know Kathy Jones and a couple other people were here, and they were having some issues because they said they couldn't get it shared. And Sister Bonnie is trying to get everything together just as well. So just want to say hey to all of those people. And I know that they will definitely be here soon. But Tony, we have some additional questions just as well. So I know we're talking about sugar, but the question is, where does gout come from? And I want to add to that question. Does sugar have anything to do with gout?
So I think I can take this question, Nikki. And that is,
take it, Doug. Take it.
All right, I'm going to take this one. Okay, so gout occurs when you have too much of a particular salt in your system. And what happens is there's so much in there that it comes out as crystals. Crystals enter into the joint. Your body that tries to get rid of it, but it can't because it's a solid subject. And you get this really intense chemical reaction. And gout has 2 different sources. One, either you make too much of that salt metabolically, that's your chemistry, Or two, you can't get rid of that salt fast enough out of your system, and it begins to build up like a reservoir. And so there are different medications to adjust any part of that. So is it related to sugar? Well, interestingly enough, when I had my first rheumatology fellowship back in 1985, I was told you can't have gout and diabetes at the same time. But I can guarantee you I saw it in my practice. I cannot say that they are separate. But what I can say is if you're eating a diet that is high and rich in the substance that is the basis of that crystal called purines, you also might be having a sugar-rich diet too, and that may cause a problem. So there may be some kind of link.
So, Doug, what are some of those foods? What are some of those foods that can cause that?
The worst one are the hops and beer. So that's the one that I can remember the most right now. I'd have to probably grab my textbook and look it up because I can't tell you all the other ones. But we really have.
Well, I got you. Dr. Miller, are there any additional foods that may cause these episodes? Or Dr. Mason, Joe, Tony, are there any additional foods that may cause these episodes? And could sugar be one of them?
They used to call gout the disease of the affluent.
Affluent, yeah.
That's what, when I was going through medical school a long time ago, that's what you talk about. And basically what they attribute affluence to was people who had lots and abundant supplies of meat and pastries and different other kinds of things, just overabundance of a number of different kinds of foods. And so I think that I think Doug explained nicely what it was, but there's a lot of foods that there's a lot of problems with certain foods. And I think that's why no matter what you believe, you should try and eat things as naturally as you can.
Yeah.
I mean, because and unfortunately, our food supply is not really designed to make us healthy. Our food supply, a lot of it, particularly, and let me just caveat that by saying, when I'm talking about that's not healthy, is the stuff that's not being presented in its natural form, quote unquote, natural form.
Yeah.
If it's been processed, if it's been altered, then it's going to create, because the body's going to look at it and say, what the hell is that? And it's going to react to it. So we need to really try as best as we can with the definitions we heard this evening to try to eat foods in as close a natural state as possible. Obviously, that's difficult for certain types of foods, but for other foods like fruits and vegetables, it's pretty easy. Obviously, if you're eating meats or what have you, and you're cooking them and what have you, got to be careful about all of that. There are things that happen to foods especially when you cook them like we cook them. And there's char on them, and there's all kinds of other things that we need to be careful about. So I would just offer those words.
Yeah.
Oh,
As I learned the term earlier, it was called the disease of the king. And it was first described when the king had a big feast, and he was obviously at the center of the eating, and the next day he was not able to walk because of the things that he consumed caused his gout to flare up. And so eating those rich foods that are probably not healthy, a lot of meat, those kinds of things will bring about gout attack. In addition to that, also we have to be concerned about if we are taking medication for other illness that we have, which can also sometimes the thiazide diuretics can sometimes cause gout to flare up. So we have to be concerned when we with our diet in terms of what else is going into our body besides the food that we take, in terms of and what effect does it have when we put that combination together.
And I was just going to add that it's kind of like good news and bad news. The good news is that, well, let me start with the bad news. There are a lot of the things that we love to consume can flare up your gout. And, things like mama's gravy, which we love so much, things like alcohol, excessive alcohol consumption can flare it up. Organ meats, I'm a huge fan of liver and organ meats, but it can flare it up in some people. And then certain types of fish like scallops, tuna. So that's kind of like the bad news there. But the good news is that if you reduce inflammation in your body, and you're going to definitely find yourself in trouble. So in fact, I like this comment from one of my favorite people, Dr. Let me get the right comment up real quick. It's Dr. Vivian Lowe, a brilliant doctor. I encourage you guys to check out her YouTube channel. I think it's VLMD YouTube channel, but she made a comment, and this is the direction I was going in, so it was perfectly timed. She says high fructose corn syrup increases uric acid. So we got more doctors on the panel tonight, and she's right. So what I've learned is, so one of the things that Dr. Lowe knows about and I know about is that they have guidelines for therapeutic carb restriction. And in those guidelines for people who follow that dietary pattern, they actually have a little section saying caution, because if you go on a diet where your body is having to get rid of ketones because you're not keto adaptive, you're breaking down fat, turning them into ketones. The ketones are not being used for energy because you're not used to it yet. So in the beginning of that dietary pattern, you're going to get rid of so many ketones. Guess what happens to the uric acid? Can't leave because they're competing to exit your urine. So now the uric acid actually can flare up if you start keto or low carb in the beginning. But I have good news. This is the good news. Once you become keto adaptive, you're going to, first of all, stop spilling all those ketones. You're going to use it for fuel. And because there's going to be so much reduction in inflammation, people who do this dietary pattern and they can't be going in and out of it because it can lead to problems, those people actually don't have gout flares. And they can still eat some of the things that they enjoy, like a steak, without the concern that that's going to flare up the gout because they've reduced the inflammation. So it's kind of you have to use caution. That's why as we encourage people to use dietary patterns that their body's not used to, we have to know the nuance. The clinicians need to know what to look out for. And then if they do that, they're going to do much better. So I just wanted to throw that out there as kind of good news and bad news. If you start eating a whole foods diet, you're going to do much better. There's some more questions in the comments. Nikki, you want to tackle any of those?
To those who sent in your gout questions, and then you extended them once we tried to see if it had something to do with the sugar, and you still sending those gout questions over. Listen, if you went to the smorgasbord and you had, as the doctors talked about, tons of seafood, tons of meat, and then you had a bunch of soda pop, you were just in gout heaven. So
you might be going the other way.
Yeah. Well, right. Maybe it wasn't gout heaven. You're just in pain right now, and we really feel for you. But I don't know if there's anything you can do besides go to your doctor, because I know a lot of you are asking these questions, and some of you, I know you personally, so I kind of know where you were eating it and what you were doing. So as Dr. Mason said, it's the illness of the kings, or the affluent. So sometimes you got to just slow it down a little bit, but I do understand it's quite painful. So I'm sorry if that is happening to you. I'm trying to understand what Nellie Purnell King, is she saying that red meat causes it, or is she asking a question about red meat? So Nellie, I don't know if you're asking, but I think they kind of shared that red meat can cause it. Am I correct? And if that's the question she's asking, then red meat can cause it. And if you were just putting that in there to let us know that red meat causes it, thank you so very much. Well, VJP asks, is there a healthy type of sugar in chocolate? I want to know the answer to this one.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, like, I think chocolate or cocoa which is, or cacao, depending on how you want to pronounce it. When I was in my nutrition training, they just said it was a great antioxidant. One of the healthiest things you can eat is dark chocolate. And the reason why you want to be dark is because you're trying to get rid of the sugar in the chocolate, right? So if we're talking about 70, 80, 90% dark chocolate, and you're really consuming more cacao or cocoa, depending on how you want to pronounce it, you're going to then reduce inflammation. You're going to then improve your blood pressure. You may lower your cholesterol. The key is the sugar is actually not what we're looking for as a benefit. It's really the other components of the chocolate that's healthy. So yes, so when I make a chocolate cake, I make a diet doctor has a version that uses dark chocolate, butter, eggs, and vanilla flavor. You eliminate the excessive sugar. There's just enough sugar in it, and you may put a little whipped cream on it to make it sweet. But you know why it's sweet to me? Because I'm not consuming a lot of sugar. So my the sweetness in that dark chocolate is sufficient. So as a general rule, dark chocolate is a wonderful way to kind of end the night if you're interested in a little snack. But you got to heal from the toxicity of over consumption. And by the way, most of those sugar alternatives we talked about earlier are 200 to 400 times more sweet than sugar. So we've hijacked our taste buds, and we're so accustomed to that we can't even enjoy the things that are sweet naturally, like a strawberry. So we really have gone full circle in the wrong way. So I think it's a good question, but I would argue that dark chocolate should be okay, but focus on the cacao instead of on the sugar part.
All right. So Nelly also asked a question. She says, is yucca good for gout?
Wow. So that's a great question. And one of the problems that you have with gout is inside that joint, it hurts so much because there's no oxygen in that joint. It's one of the most painful things that people go through. It's in the top 5. So while that's going on, it's going to be really, really hard to move. I mean, it's going to hurt like blazes to move that joint, that foot, that wrist. And so in generally, we say that you can move it after the flare has gone away. But while you're having an active flare, you might find there's more pain than gain if you try and exercise it. The value of
how long are these episodes?
It varies with the individual. Most of these attacks usually don't last longer than 3 to 5 days and go away pretty quickly with medications. But there are sets of circumstances where you have a very unfortunate individual where it lasts longer. And that's where the challenge comes in for the specialist, is how to get this to calm down without running into side effects from other medications.
Is this something you'll have in your life?
Well, that's the issue about medications. If you've had more than 3 attacks a year and it's caused you problems like missing work or missing school, most people are so tired of it, they're willing to go on medications. Once they're on medications, and for the most part, they'll never experience another gout attack. But it also depends why. Whether you're making too much of it or can't get it out because your kidneys just can't get rid of it. So it depends on which circumstance. And also, are you changing your diet? Because sometimes if you insist on having a couple of those old styles every day, it might be really hard to control your gout.
And Nikki, I'll just add real quick that yucca is a type of root, and this is really an important concept, right? So you can go into the health food store and go crazy. Mm-hmm. And you can, when I went through my nutrition training, my head was exploding with supplement, herb after herb after herb after herb, right? And what I try to tell people, that you want to get to the root cause of why I have inflammation in the first place. And most of the time, you can solve that problem with diet. Now, the beauty of herbs and spices and things like that from the earth is that they can you can focus. So if I'm really concerned about inflammation, I may want to consider a turmeric herb in addition to maybe my healthy dietary pattern, whether it's a low carb like myself or a low fat like Dr. Mason. So, but to then say, I'm going to use a yucca root to be healthy, as opposed to the lifestyle, that's not going to work. In other words, you can't out herbal a poor diet.
Yeah.
You can try to, but it's not going to work. So, and that herb is going to reduce inflammation. So, of course, it's good for gout because it reduces inflammation. But if you have a dietary pattern that also does that, you may not need to spend hundreds of dollars on supplements when you could have simply just had a low inflammation diet. So that's kind of and in the population I serve, they can't afford to spend, a ton of dollars. They're just trying to get enough food for the week. They can't then go and spend another $50 for one herb and then another one and another supplement. So what I say is use what makes sense for you, but don't just focus on your diet first, drinking water, avoiding processed food, highly refined grains and sugars, seed oils. If you do that first, you probably won't even have to add those various supplements to the equation.
Outstanding. Well, Michael asks, how is gout affected by eating in a carnivore eating pattern?
It kind of goes back to what was mentioned earlier. If you do a keto diet, low carb diet, and you're following the guidelines for therapeutic carb restriction, the carnivore diet is the extreme version of carb restriction, right? You're not eating any, which sounds crazy, but for those who don't tolerate plants as well for various reasons, it's going to be the same methodology. You have to kind of ease into the dietary pattern. For some people, they may have to take allopurinol or colchicine temporarily while they're becoming carnivore adaptive, right? And then once they become adaptive, they probably want to consistently take on that dietary pattern and then not go in and out of it. Because if they do, every time they go out of that dietary pattern, what they're going to end up doing is increasing the chances that they're going to flare up their gout, or if they're having kidney uric acid stones, flaring that up. So it's very nuanced, but it's the same methodology as you use for other dietary patterns. So that's kind of, and by the way, just as a aside, this dietary pattern, which sounds like crazy, they did do a study, but the problem with the study, it was an observational study. Now, when they did the observational study, everything got better. Diabetes went away, blood pressure got better, people felt better. Everything that you would worry about got better. However, it's observational, and it was more of a survey study. And so now what they're trying to do is get the funding to pay for a randomized controlled trial. So as a clinician, if I see somebody who benefits from it, I will support them on that dietary pattern. But we do need more research before we make it before U.S. News and World Report will endorse it. We need the randomized controlled trials to support that dietary pattern.
All right. I want to say hey to my good friend, Dr. Sylvia Robinson. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to make a comment to what, excuse me. Oh my goodness, Dr. Tony was saying. And randomized, people talk about randomized controlled trials. And just so you know what that means, okay? So because we throw terms around, and I didn't know what it meant a long time ago either. So basically what it is, if you wanted to prove that one thing was causing a problem, you have to first of all try and identify that one thing. And then you try and find it in a food that's not got a whole bunch of other stuff with it that could be complicating the matter. So you have to be careful about it. And then what you do is to try and make it fair, you give, you don't tell anybody what they're getting. They get randomized by numbers. You get this, you get that. You don't know what's happening. I don't know what's happening. and then you watch and see what happens, or you measure things and see what happens. And that's what that is. The problem, unfortunately, with with trials in general, and one of the things that we had to you deal with is sometimes you can have confounding factors.
Mm.
You can have other things that could be creating a problem or not creating the problem that you did not look for or test for. So we have to be careful. And when we talk about medicines, see, the randomized controlled trials help a lot with medicine, because basically with medicine you're looking at one particular compound, and you can isolate that one particular compound, and then you can give other people something that either has it or doesn't have that particular compound, and watch what happens. So we use these terms, and I just wanted to sort of say what that meant, because for most of the doctors and people on this panel, we know what that is, but for you sitting out there, you don't know what the devil we're talking about, and we want you to understand as best you can what it is, and it's hard to do. And one of the things we're trying to do right now is get about $1,200,000 together to do such a study, to look at some different things, to sort of really answer some questions. So, so just because something happens to you and it doesn't happen to somebody else, doesn't mean that it's that. It could be something else.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to do it enough people to figure out whether or not it's this thing or that thing that's causing the problem. So I apologize for taking a little time for that, but I just thought it was important.
You don't need to apologize, Dr. Mace. You don't need to. I just want you to get some water, because I'm concerned. You were trying a little bit, so don't want you to fall out. Or we love your comment. Thank you. I mean, people are thanking you for your comment. Jacqueline Cooper says, as a person dealing with a chronic illness, my question is how much, if any, red meat is okay. I'm more of a baked person, rarely, if any, fried foods.
This is a great question, because like I'm hosting this night's episode of Couch Conversation with the Doctors. It's on a platform that's kind of a low carb platform. However, you have two doctors in particular who have different approaches. I'm a low carb doctor, nearly carnivore version, and Dr. Mason is plant-based. So I think this is a great question, because my message and I know Jackie Cooper, is very simple. There are a couple of ways to solve a problem when it comes to nutrition. And in fact, I shouldn't even say a couple, there are many. That's why we have Mediterranean and paleo and vegan. We have all of these different approaches, right? And so for me and my brain, who is literally eating a steak tonight, I have no problem with red meat. In fact, when I eat plants, I get sick. I get bloated. I get gassy. I was a vegetarian for 8 years. So for me, I think red meat's okay. Do I think processed meat can be a problem for some people and maybe slightly increase your risk? I do, because I look at the studies and it says there's a slight increased risk for processed meat for certain things like cancer, but the risk is not what you hear in the headlines. The risk is it goes from maybe 1% to 2%. And I tell my patients, if you're going to stop eating bacon because it goes from 1% to 2%, that's a decision you make. I'm going to eat bacon. So you have to kind of make a decision. And I also have a holistic approach, which is I'm doing so many other things like meditation and sauna and getting enough sleep and other things that I think all of these things in totality will keep me in a safe place. I tell my patients regularly, red meat has saturated fat. What the College of Cardiology says, saturated fat does not increase the risk for cardiovascular disease and is protective against stroke. That's totally the opposite of what we've been trained and learned for years. And I still have cardiologists who don't even know what the American College of Cardiology has put out there. So I just think that you do what's best for you. For most of my patients, they are comfortable eating red meat. And I think being a baked person is probably not the best approach, because you're eating a lot of baked goods, tend to be processed goods, tend to have a lot of sugar and flour, and your body generally can't tolerate that. So I would move away from that. If you do fried foods, I would stay away from frying in seed oils. I would prefer avocado and coconut oil at higher temperatures. And I would be comfortable with fried chicken if it's not covered with flour. So I think it's all about what works for you. That's a long answer, but I just wanted to frame that and make sure my audience knew that Dr. Terry Mason is a plant-based doctor. I'm a low-carb, animal-based doctor, and I don't want to confuse anybody when they come to this platform, when they hear these varying. But before Dr. Mason has any comments, I think that's what's cool about this. Where else on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook do you have people with slightly different perspectives who can not kill each other while they're having this conversation? So I really think it's really it's impressive. I have nothing but respect for him and his approach. And I do have vegans in my practice. So Dr. Terry Mason, the floor is yours.
But right before Dr. Mason answers, right before he answers you, I want to clear up a little something that Jacqueline Cooper said. Can you just take that down for me just a moment? I believe what Jacqueline meant when she stated baked foods, because she actually recommented back. She's talking about baking her food in the oven. Like, she may have chicken, but that chicken may be baked. She may have a steak, but she may broil that steak in the oven. I think that's what she means by baked goods. I don't think she's talking about having a crisp set of cookies. I don't think that that's what she's talking about. I think she's talking about actually baking her chicken, or maybe broiling her asparagus or something inside of the oven instead of having it on top on a grill or something. I think that's her plate. So Jackie, I got you, girl. I just wanted to make sure yeah, that's right, girl. I got you. I see. She says, yes, definitely. That's what she was talking about. And I love the conversations between Dr. Mason and Dr. Tony. And Dr. Maya couldn't be here tonight, but she will be here on next Monday. And I want to say hey to my good friend, my good girlfriend also, who is listening in. And she is listening in with us, and that's Dr. Sylvia Robinson, who was our guest on last week. So Sylvia is listening on her drive home. Dr. Tony talks about diets, and Dr. Mason talks about livids. So, because he doesn't believe in the word diet. And when you constantly hear the word, it does make you go, wait a minute, am I dying to get skinny? I want to live. So you look at that livid in a sense. And, he has a great book, and they talk about those forks over knives. So, go ahead, Dr. Mason.
Well, it's not to get into any kind of debate. And I really, it's not as much of a debate as it may appear. I consider what I do low carb too. When you eat plants, you don't get much lower carb than that. When you talk about carbs, the ones that are bad are the processed carbs, the ones where you got the added sugars, or you got all these other things, or even because but there's a lot of additional calories in French fries, but it's not from the potatoes, it's from the oil that most of the potatoes are fried in, if they're fried in that stuff. So I'm not going to get into an argument about that. I have lived a carnivore lifestyle, and that bought me 2 stents in my heart. So no, 3, I'll take that back, 3 stents. And because I was eating, and I loved my steaks. I used to eat a T-bone steak every single day. I used to go to the butcher and have them slice me 7 steaks every week, and I ate one every single day. And that's one of the things that may not have been completely all, but it was certainly one of the major factors. And so when I switched and went to eating more plant-based, and this is an N of 1, so you always got to just me. You'll probably have, if you talk to enough people, you'll see a wide variety. But for me, I had gotten up to 245 pounds or more. And when I switched and began to decide that I was going to eat the way I eat now, which is as Dr. Tony said, plant-based, that and walking. And I want to and make sure you add that. Walking is a wonderful exercise. Number one, it's the second thing you learn to do after you're born. It is the walking. Crawling gets all your muscles ready for you to walk. And I walk, and I don't walk like a crazy person, but I do walk. But I did go back to my college weight of 154 pounds over about, I would say, maybe 9 months or so. But it didn't happen quickly, and I have not gone back, and I will not go back to eating what I was eating before, because this works best for me now. And I think that other people have had other results, and I'm gonna tell you, I'd like to then I'll end with this: whatever you're going to do, however you're going to do it, what kind of lifestyle you want to take as far as your eating is concerned, make sure you add some activity to that. But also know the reason I call it a live it, because I don't eat things that are dead. None of what I eat is dead. They're all plants, so they're all alive. And the beautiful thing about plants to me is that if I don't cook them at all, I can eat it, because they call that a salad. So there's a lot of ways you can do things, and then we all will have our own stories of how this works for us and what it does or does not do. But I am totally convinced, and there's a lot of data that helps support that. And actually, we're going to Portugal to talk about this with a study in July. So I think the divergence of opinions that we get here, and I think it's important. And to me, low carb, Dr. Tony calls what he does low carb. I call what I do low carb, because that's all I eat is carbs, but I eat no processed carbs. When you get into higher carbs, it's because you've taken that thing that came out of the ground and did something to it. Because by itself, it's not that, other than if it's sugar crystals or something like that. But for the most part, I consider what I do very low carb, maybe even as lower than even what Dr. Tony eats.
If I could just sort of throw in a couple of the things. Yeah, so I can throw in a couple of the things here that I think both doctors are addressing, is that when we talk about eating good, we're talking about more than just one thing. If you're going to eat well and don't do exercise, then you're still not getting the full advantage of it. If you're beginning to take in other substances that are bad for your body, such as excess alcohol. So it has to do with doing multiple things that are healthy for you, getting proper rest, dealing with stress in a way that it's not causing you to have harm to your body in terms of vasoconstriction, which cause other issues. So there's a gamut of things that we have to do on a regular basis in terms of helping to make us healthy. Eating is one of those things, but also on the other end is how we dissipate those calories that we consume. How do we take care of our body in the best way that allow it to be able to rest and do what it needs to recover from whatever we're going through.
Outstanding. Well, our time is here, but right before we take the time, I just want to go through and just say thank you. Like Tia Banks says, great information. I know for a fact that beer causes gout. My grandpa suffered from it because he drank it every day, literally. All right, Granddad, slow down off those Miller's Genuine Drafts. That's not gonna help you. But Tia, thank you for sharing, because for all of those adamant beer drinkers that are out here, I think they really probably needed to hear that. Ann's MD has had some great comments along the way just as well, and he gives a great thumbs up to some the fact of eating, some baked goods. And Jacqueline comes back and she says, can you combine the two? And Jacqueline, I'm going to tell you, we're going to answer that question for you on next Monday. So stay tuned. She has a great question. She wants to know can you combine the two, plant-based and carnivore? And if so, how? So we're going to kind of attack that question for you on next week. Tia says, thank you for the information. So does E-Ans MD says, thank you for the information, that he loves the panel just as well. Michael also says, has anyone had an experience with celery juicing? My girlfriend does it for her Graves' disease. We can grab that question for you on next Monday too. So we definitely want you to stay tuned. And we're going to share that with you. VJB actually says, great points. Moderation works. There's Sister Bonnie. She has finally been able to grab that link and she has gotten in. And Eureka Hicks says, I use an air fryer. Is that okay? We're going to kind of talk about that air fryer next week. I know Dr. Mason doesn't want to hear this, so don't y'all listen. Don't close his ears. But a friend of mine just got a brand new air fryer, and she is going to be air frying up some chicken wings on Wednesday. So I'm going over her house on Wednesday. Dr. Mason, cover your ears. I don't want you to hear that. I want you to hear that. So we will be having some air fried chicken wings over Miss Jenny's house on Wednesday. So we're going to grab those questions that you left here. Trust me, we're not going to forget them, and we're going to answer those for you on next week. Right now, we're going to go around the table as we always do. And we're literally going to say, we just got a private comment that I actually got to share this. The person says, I love these conversations, and I really love these things that you guys talk about. Dr. Tony often talks about rest. I want to know, how can you actually really get rest? I think that's a great question. And I want the answer to that too myself. I mean, our work schedules sometimes are so crazy. And you may not believe it. We just kind of got out of an election season, and we're going into an even heightened election season because we have a runoff. So during the election season, I probably sleep maybe 2-3 hours an evening. In this last weekend, I have had no sleep whatsoever. And I am sitting still. And I've gotten like 6 text messages like, are you yarning? Yes, I'm yarning because I am sitting still. And the moment I have sat still and I haven't had any sleep since Thursday, I have become so sleepy. I'm so sleepy because I'm actually still. That's why I'm rocking. And then I'm the type of person that when I get cold, I get even sleepier. So I keep my house kind of cool. And if I didn't have these glasses on, I probably got one eye open because it's coming down on me. So we're going to talk about that rest. And I think that rest thing is really, really important. So I want you guys to stay tuned for that because that's important. And it causes stress when you don't sleep. I think tonight I'm going to just fall off because I think if I don't sleep tonight, I'm going to probably be sick tomorrow. So yeah, we're going to talk about that. We're going to go around this table as we always do. And we're going to do our Until Next Mondays. Douglas Graham, what's your Until Next Monday?
I want to close the loop on gout because we were talking about the things that cause gout. But what about the things you can eat that are healthy for you, that won't cause gout, that'll help you? And believe it or not, we go right back to Dr. Mason and right back to Dr. Tony. We got to talk about fresh fruits, fresh vegetables. You can eat them all, and whole grains. So keep that in mind. If you got the gout, you're doing the right thing for you if you follow the recommendations of the panel.
Outstanding. Dr. Miller, you're Until Next Monday.
Until next Monday, on this format, we often introduce things that we're hearing or reading about in the journals or hearing about in the general news. And want to say a couple of things about that. Sometimes we can give information, and sometimes that information may be overwhelming to certain people. It may be confusing to some people. But the whole idea here is not to overwhelm or confuse you, but just to raise the issue and to create the process of thinking about what it is that you're doing, what you may not be doing, so you can better decide how you're going to approach your health. Because ultimately, there's only one person that really has control over how you conduct yourself, and that's you. And the more information that you have, the better position that you'll be in to be able to do that in a more efficient and better manner. So even though we give you information, it's not really to overwhelm you or to make you, it's to create that thought about what it is that I need to do. How do I approach this? What do I need to eliminate? What do I need to add? Am I doing too much of this or too less of that? That's the idea here.
Outstanding. Joe Harrington, you're Until Next Monday.
Well, I've got a number of things to say, but I will try to be brief. We're not really telling people what to do. We're offering information that's not only based upon fact, it's actually based upon evidence. There's evidence to say that many of the things we're saying are in fact true. And so we're not telling people what to do, but providing information so people can make an informed choice, an informed decision about what they do moving forward. And I have two things to offer up for my next week. There are two quotes, and people probably have heard these before. And it's really what we're saying. And one is, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. The other one is, and this is an homage to Dr. Mason, eat to live, not live to eat.
Come on, Danny Davis. All right, Joe Harrington. Come on. You know, Dr. Mason and it's Dr. Mason and Danny Davis isms. You come on, Joe, because yeah, what you did. Thank you so much. Thank you. Dr. Terry Mason, you're until next Monday.
Well, first of all, thank the Congressman Forrest Nikki for helping to provide this UN and provide this forum for us. I think it's very good. I think that people need to understand that just because we may disagree doesn't mean we're disagreeable. That there are different viewpoints, and it's important that we have this, because if you're hearing the same thing from everybody, I'm not sure it would be that worthwhile for you. So and then at the end of the day, you got to try stuff for yourself, because that's the best way to test and to find out. Just don't do it. And God we trust. All others must have data. So make sure that you get the information.
That part right there. That part. Go ahead. That part.
So that's what I would do, and I'm grateful to it. And I want you to know that yes, we may differ. It's not that one of us is wrong and the other one is right. It's that they're different approaches. I think that people have had experiences, as I have had, as I mentioned in what I had to say, that shaped their lives, and in one way or another. And so what you need to do is think about what's going to work best for you. Try it and see if it does or not. But get the data. Don't go by how you feel. Get the information to be sure for yourself.
Outstanding, outstanding. Tony, you're until next Monday. Dr. Hampton.
I'll wrap up my comments by briefly commenting or answering at least a couple of things real quick. So I just wanted to say this real quick. Yes, there's a carnivore MD. His name is Dr. Paul Saladino, and he eats carnivore and he eats fruit, and he believes that that's a better approach. I don't think everybody in the carnivore community completely agrees with that, but that's what he does. So I would look up him as a person who combines plants and carnivore successfully. I also want to do a shout out again to Dr. Vivian Lowe. I did put her YouTube channel in the comments, and she's a phenomenal clinician who is amazing. So I just want to make sure people are aware of her. And if you want to really learn some science, it's almost like going to a class when you look at her YouTube channel. She is somebody I highly recommend. She speaks along with myself at some of these national conferences that deal with low carb. But my final comment is this. When I was a vegetarian, I read a book that Dr. Mason is aware of called How to Disease Proof My Kids, right? And I think that book, I think it was by, I couldn't remember if it was Esselstyn. It may have been him, but it was a book that was plant-based. And what happens is we are very interested. Nobody on this forum, whether we're speaking or just chiming in, are interested in being unhealthy. That's why we're tuning in or participating. If you put in the Dr. Ornish approach, which is more plant-based, the algorithm is then going to push you towards more plant-based folk. That's just how it works. If I put in Dr. Sean Baker or Dr. Anthony Chafee, who are carnivores, the algorithm is going to push you more towards that approach. the thing that people have to understand, and I've mentioned this before, Hong Kong eats 2 steaks per day, and they have the longest longevity. Right after that are the blue zone places like Japan, etc., and they live into their 85th year and later. So my point of it is this: there are many ways to achieve your health related goals. What you have to be open to is the idea that it doesn't have to be my way or Dr. Terry Mason's way. It's the way that works for you. Your body will answer that question. For me, I found that the dietary pattern I used to have did not work for my gut and my stomach. So I changed it. And that's the experiment you need to do. So understand, you just happen to land at plant-based or carnivore is almost a random thing. It was like something your friend told you or a YouTube video told you, and then you went down that rabbit hole. And the good news is multiple dietary patterns will help you heal. So my goal is to make sure people have access to multiple dietary patterns, and then they choose the dietary pattern that works for them.
All right, all right. Just want to share a few things before we go. Remember, and I know you guys really, yeah, you know this already, but I got to tell you, COVID is still out here. So we want you guys to stay safe. If you're in a position where you don't feel like you at a room where there's herd immunity, just put a mask on. It's not that hard. Just remember to put a mask on. I know all of you all are washing your hands as you should. Nobody needs to tell you to do that. But I just want to remind you, wash your hands. Sometimes we forget when we're near those odd doorknobs or the grocery store carts and things of that sort. So just make sure you're washing your hands before you rub your eyes or touch your face. And remember to wear that mask properly when you need to wear it. There's no a beard mask or eyeglass masks or that one side mask. Just put it across that nose and mouth, making sure that it's secured so you can be healthy and you can hang out with everybody. And if you're one of those people who want to be a trendsetter, get your latest COVID vaccine. You want to be up to date on all your COVID vaccines. So if you're one of those people who want to have the latest in everything that there is, get your latest COVID vaccine. Want to remind you of that just as well. Want to make a couple quick announcements for you. Want to let you know that March is Women Making History Month. So let's celebrate all the women in your lives, all your moms and everyone, your aunts, your wives, everyone, your sisters, Women Making History Month. And we want to remind you that the congressman, that's Congressman Danny K. Davis, along with the National Council of Negro Women, will have a free and open to the public Women Making History Award ceremony at the Columbus Park Reflectory Thursday, March 17th at 5:30 in the evening. There'll be light hors d'oeuvres served at that time, but there will be some phenomenal women that will be honored at that time. So if you want to meet us at 5701 West on Jackson Street at the Columbus Park Reflectory. That's Thursday evening at 5:30, and that's March 17th. So meet us there. Also, want to remind everyone of, we work this show. It's for informational purposes only, but this show is to help in healthcare disparities. We started this show when COVID started, to keep you aware before we even knew what the name was. And we are still here because we allow you, the community, to run the show. We're just here to read and answer your questions, and we allow you to set the narrative. Just want to remind you that Congressman Danny K. Davis, in conjunction with the Cook County Physicians Association, the Nurses Association, Westside United, and the Chicago branch of the NAACP, will have the State of Black Health 2023, raising awareness in celebration to Black Maternal Health Month from conception to expiration. That's Saturday, April 15th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. We will have a plenary session, and then there will be some breakout sessions. And this is something that Dr. Roy Walker and Dr. Terry Mason and I had kind of thought of putting together on last year, and then we had some dating issues, and now we are back on track with it. Tentatively, we're going to be at Malcolm X College, where we will have that space. We will make sure that everyone is aware of everything. We will be sharing on all of our social media sites QR codes for you to register to be there. So you can share. All of these are solution-based conversations. So even after we have our openings, we usually then kind of cart rooms like tanks, and we have a scribe and a speaker there so we can share these information so we can make sure that we are having some solutions. So I wanted to make sure that we shared those updates with you just as well. And guess what? Usually it's very rare that I share until next Monday. I usually move on, but my until next Monday tonight is I'm going to bed. You guys have a good one.